Coming up in today's Elder Scrolls Weekly, we get brand new hands-on reactions to the Elder Scrolls Online, we look at skills, gameplay, questing and more, and we've got the very first episode of Olaf Season 2. It's all in this week's Elder Scrolls Weekly. Hello everyone and a very warm welcome to this week's Elder Scrolls Weekly. I'm here with Dan, our producer. Hello Dan.
Hello Matt.
You alright?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry Kelly's not here this week, Andrew Kelly.
He's a very busy man. We sort of have Kelly sporadically, and also he's been working very hard on something that we've got coming up later on today, which is the brand new episode of Olaf. That's not too much of a spoiler, is it? Can I say that now?
No, that's fine, yeah.
That's fine. The premiere of the first episode of Season 2 of Olaf is coming up. And also, I got to go hands-on with the game at Quakecon last week, so we're going to go through a few of the newest things that we picked out in that build. Thanks very much to everyone who tuned in last week. It was about the biggest episode that we've done so far, which is really, really encouraging to see. I think mainly because we filled it with loads of brand new gameplay, which is quite helpful. But
yeah, it was good. It was good fun.
Thanks very much for your support as ever, and let's get cracking on this week's episode.
You were hands-on last week at Quakecon. How was Quakecon?
It was awesome. Yeah, it's bizarre. I've never been to one before, and it's just got this really sort of friendly kind of... They call it like the Woodstock of gaming. Like, there's loads of people there bringing their own massive PCs, and they sort of set them up in a hall, and they all fight each other. And I kind of went down there about midnight, and they were sort of all hopped up on Mountain Dew and whooping and killing each other, playing Dota and stuff. So it was incredible, and it's really cool that, you know, because Bethesda or ZeniMax own id Software, you kind of have all the opportunity for Bethesda to show off loads of new games like Wolfenstein and obviously like ESO, so it was a really cool chance to get hands on with it.
And it started off as quite a small thing, right?
Tiny, yeah, back in 1996 I think, and you see pictures of it and it was like sort of 3 computers on a desk, and now it's just in this enormous Dallas hotel.
It's massive,
yeah. Incredible.
Okay, so from your hands on, there's a few things that I want to ask you. Maybe cover some points that we mentioned last week that we didn't know at the time, that you would be able to get hands-on with it. And the one thing we did talk about last week was the character creation.
Yeah.
Andrew Kelly went into quite a bit of depth with it, but I was just wondering if there's anything new that you could add to his thoughts on it.
I'm sort of not entirely sure what you covered, but sort of I kind of went into it with a point of view of... stupidly just making like a handsome dark elf or a pretty dark elf, because one of the things I found in Skyrim was it was really, really difficult to make that race look good. And certainly I found with the character creator, like hands-on with it, it was incredible really, like the range of stuff you can do, and it was really easy to make a nice looking character. You had the thing where you can sort of preview what your character will look like in sort of high-end armour, and that was pretty cool. And I probably spent about like 10-15 minutes tweaking with it, and the range of options was pretty strong. I don't know if Kelly went into numbers, but like I found there was sort of like 11 different hair types and sort of 10 or 12 different types of adornment for each character and things like that. So in addition to all these sliders and scales you can use in terms of what you want your character to look like, there's loads and loads of little different things you can tweak them with. So you know that thing with Skyrim where you can like have one sort of white eye and one red if you're a Dunmer and things like that. So it had all of that. Customization seemed to be really, really strong, and we were limited again to Ebonheart Pact, so we only had Nord, Argonian and Dark Elf. But yeah, like I sort of was in a room full of journalists and we all made different characters, and I didn't see anyone at all that had 2 characters that look similar, so I mean, it's looking fairly good so far. I don't know if that's added anything to what you talked about, but I was impressed with it generally.
Do you know what area you started in?
I do. This is sort of interesting because we were on a place called Bleak Rock Isle, which I've read about. I think it was seen in one of the previews last year, and everything that I read about it suggested it was off the coast of Skyrim. But the first thing I did when I started was sort of zoom the map out as far as it would go, and it was locked to sort of the area that we were in, so you couldn't get the world map. But I asked Paul Sage, and we were sort of, from what I gather, we were in Morrowind, but we were right on the sort of, that's Morrowind, not Vardenfall, so hopefully we might be able to represent this on screen a little bit. So Vardenfall's the island, Morrowind's the sort of land mass that surrounds it. We were kind of on the northwest side of Morrowind as it gets sort of up close towards the edge of Skyrim. So the rift from Skyrim, which is like the sort of the bottom right bit of Skyrim's map, was visible on our map. But it was sort of quite far up, and we were a little bit further down. So it was off the coast, sort of between Skyrim and Morrowind, and it had this real feel of like the two kind of cultures sort of merging together quite well. So like I woke up and the first thing I did was sort of start going around looking for loot in barrels and things like that. First thing I found was Kwama eggs, which is like a Morrowind staple, and they've showed off the Kwama already, like concept art of it. And that kind of made me feel immediately at home. But you get outside and it's very, very Skyrim. It was kind of rocky and bleak and covered in snow, and there were wolves and frostbite spiders and things like that. So it definitely feels like it's sort of somewhere in between. And that's kind of exciting for me. I like the idea of like when you get to some of the areas that we're less familiar with, you're going to get this kind of merging of sort of cultures, a bit like, Brittany or New Mexico or something like that, where you see both sides, see them sort of clashing together, and it was pretty cool. It was an island, so it was sort of limited space really, but it was really, really densely packed in terms of the amount of stuff that you could do. Probably very familiar in terms of monsters and things like that. Anyone who plays Skyrim will be instantly recognising it. It was sort of, icy waters and snow and rock and wolves and stuff like that, like I said. So, yeah, it felt like a sort of a legitimate part of Tamriel to me.
So you say you woke up in this area. What did you do? Do you go around talking to NPCs looking for quests? Did you have something to do already?
Yeah, I sort of assume that they probably keyed it up to make it as dense as possible for anyone that was just started. So you woke up, and I'm assuming this is probably the first thing you do after this initial bit in Cold Harbour that you've probably read about, where you sort of wake up in prison in Cold Harbour and Moloch Baal's stolen your soul. And I kind of reckon this is the bit where you smash back down to earth and you wake up, and they give you the sort of spiel about you're recovering, and you sort of do the initial thing where you speak to the person that you've woken up with, and then they sort of point you in the direction of like the commander, who will then give you your first quest. So that was sort of the scene setter, but in the shack that I was in was really sort of good as a kind of an intro, because it was full of books and things like that, like setting the scene, and the books thing is slightly different. We've touched on this before, like there are sort of all these books that you will recognise from the Elder Scrolls series in the game, but you don't collect any of them. They sort of just get added to your journal. So there was the Ruins of Kemmel Z Part 1, and there was Feyfolk, and I think the whole kind of that big library of lore is going to be in the game.
And they don't affect your stats like they do in Skyrim?
I think some of them do. I didn't find any that did. I think there will be like the occasional one, perhaps like that will spawn differently to other books. So the ones that not everyone will be able to read that will affect your stats. But I didn't personally find any when I was sort of searching around. So we did that bit, and I kind of went outside, and we kind of got my first quest. And then after that, it was that typical Elder Scrolls thing of you got your quest, now go and do whatever the hell you want. So it was interesting, that kind of the first bit where you kind of, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this, and then there was definitely a sense, and you could see it, and everyone else is like, everyone just sort of went off in their own direction and did whatever the hell they want. And I followed the main quest line that we were given a little bit, but in a really nice Elder Scrollsy way. It's hard to stick with just the first quest you were given. So as I'm walking out of the town, someone runs up to me and starts squeaking. And it turns out that she's been, she's just recovered from being turned into a skeever, which is like the sort of Skyrim equivalent of a giant rat. And she wants you to go and help her friends who are still currently rats. And it's quite nicely pinpointed on the map as well. This is one of the new things that Paul spoke about in our interview, is that they now have a compass, and the sort of the UI includes quest locations and things like that. So if you ever played like an MMO, especially like some older MMOs and some older Elder Scrolls games as well, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to find exactly what it is that you're looking for, but this felt quite simple without it ever being like, just go here and do this. Like, it was quite sort of elegantly done, I thought.
Sticking with that, you beginning to talk about the UI, is there anything else that you saw on the UI that struck you as specifically MMO-like or Elder Scrolls influenced? I think like a balance between the two? It
was deliberately un-MMO-like, and I think this is something they've mentioned before, and what I want to do next week is, if people haven't seen it already, we'll do a mock-up of what the UI looks like. So the only thing that was on screen constantly, as far as I could see, was the mini-map, which is up in the top right-hand corner. And then as you get into combat, your hotbar menu appears, and it's very sort of transparent. It's quite sort of subtly done at the bottom. And during the course of our demo, we only sort of like accumulated sort of 2 or 3 skills, because you sort of you only had 2 hours to do it, so you can only level up a limited amount of times. And you've also got your magicka, stamina, and health bars. So health's in the middle, magicka and stamina either side. And it's quite sort of minimalist, really. I think the most striking thing is when you're in third person is the view is slightly different. It's over the shoulder rather than like the kind of traditionally right behind you view you get in an Elder Scrolls game. so first person felt more comfortable, but UI wise it was very, very unintrusive, and I was sort of trying to get images of it in my head while I was playing it. And of course, every time you stop fighting, it disappears. So you have to, it was unintrusive to the point of almost not being there, which is a good thing, I think, for an MMO.
I think the next thing we should probably cover, assuming you got to this part that allowed this, is the combat, because it's always a point of discussion in the Elder Scrolls games. Probably maybe the weakest part of them.
Yeah.
How does that translate?
It was, again, very familiar. More choreographed, I think, than what we've seen in the likes of Skyrim. So, as I was playing, I played a Nightblade, which is one of the classes that I was sort of slightly less familiar with. And it starts you with, it started us with just a basic gear setup. So we had two-handed swords, we had a sword and shield, and I went out with a sword and a shield. And when you're fighting, you're getting that kind of the sort of to and fro of attacks, that kind of ebb and flow of fighting. And using a shield, obviously, you use the mouse button to hold your shield up and block blows, but every so often an enemy character will be going up for a big blow. You can sort of see them glimmer slightly, and they'll be building up for a massive hit. If you block that, they're staggered, and then if you go back with a power hit, you actually knock them off their feet. And this is I think this is their kind of implementation of a stun mechanic that you get in an MMO to sort of crowd control and things like that. So I was doing that a lot, and it kind of made the combat feel a little bit more kind of not realistic, but you know how sometimes with Skyrim and with Oblivion you kind of just feel like you're banging away on the sword and shield, and you're sort of doing that thing where you run backwards to try and avoid a hit. There was less of that, really. It felt like you were sort of standing your ground and sort of reacting to what your opponent was doing to you. And then when you sort of tie in some of the kind of the extra skills you've got in it, kind of that felt more MMO to me. So you've got the kind of the clashing of swords that feels like Skyrim, and then when I went to finish someone off, I'd hit one of my special moves, and that there was one that I had which is Assassin's Blade, which when your enemy is low on health, that does sort of 270% more damage. So it's a finishing move. It's basically, if you ever played a rogue in WoW, they had kind of Eviscerate, which is your sort of big finishing move, and it was a lot like that. So that felt really MMO, but the general fighting didn't at all. So it's quite a nice blend, really. I felt somewhere between the two.
Did you play this preview solo, or did you team up with anyone?
I didn't team up with anyone, but that's more because I'm antisocial. I did see sort of a few people teaming up together, but I kind of just wanted to go off and do my own thing and not be sort of pinned down by other people.
And that doesn't affect the game in any way?
Not at this level, because I think Bleak Rock Isle is a level 2 to 5 area, and there's really nothing on there that is too much trouble for you to solo. Certainly not in the bit that I played. I did see a few people dying here and then, but I think it was more just as they were getting accustomed to the controls. The sort of the interface for reacting with other people is definitely geared, I think, to the fact that it's going to be on console. So when you go up to someone, there's a button to interact. I can't remember what it was, maybe F. And it brings up a wheel, so you have a wheel of selections to do, so you can sort of offer to trade or offer to group up and things like that. And you have the sort of chat menu in the bottom left, like you do in all MMOs. I didn't actually use that at all. I did get whispered by one guy that I was with, so it does work as it would any other MMO. So you can whisper people, you can sort of speak out loud. But I think general sort of interactions other than speaking to each other are very much geared towards the fact that it's going to be on next generation consoles, so it's going to be selecting from your wheel. I saw a few people partying up, and I sort of helped the odd one or two people that were being attacked, but it wasn't really necessary in the bits that I was doing, but it was definitely an option, and it seemed to be really quite easily implemented as well.
Okay, the last thing I wanted to ask you about is the miscellaneous tasks.
Yeah,
this is quite a big part of the Elder Scrolls world.
Absolutely.
Just the fact you can just potter about and do anything. In Skyrim, for example, you had the wood cutting. Is that right? No.
Yeah.
The wood axing.
Yeah, wood axing.
And the mining. Is there anything like that?
I did do one or two things, and one of the interesting things is that everyone can fish. From the off, I started off in my inventory. There's 50 slots in the inventory, and I had 4 slots taken up. So I had all my gear on, and I had 4 slots which were taken up by an iron greatsword, I think. I started by default with a fire staff, I think, even though I was a Nightblade. I think they were doing that just to sort of show you the range of stuff. 5 lockpicks, and fishing bait as well. And the fishing bait's the thing I wanted to get onto, because if you've got bait, you can fish whether or not you've got a rod. So you'll see these pools of sort of frothing salmon and stuff, and that kind of implements the mini game. But I actually spent more time cooking, like with the sort of the provisioner skill. So I found a campfire after doing one quest, and I sort of looked in my inventory and I had goat meat and I had fat. So I was able to make a goat roast in true sort of Olaf Skyrim style. And it looks a little bit like you're going to use fat rather than having to just go around looking for salt like you did in Skyrim. Like it was became like the most sort of valuable commodity, because everything required salt to be cooked.
So are there any benefits to these activities? Are they purely recreational?
It was. I think the provisional one will offer health benefits, and also health regen. Like your health regen speed will increase probably when you've eaten it. And I think you also have a well-fed stat as well, which will increase your sort of general statistics. I think maybe stamina after you've eaten. It was a little bit hard to tell in the build that we had, because it was very much the starting area. So after you've been in a fight, your health was like rocketing way back up. I think once you leave that area, probably when you get to like maybe level 10, I think you'll start to see the fact that you need to eat to get your health back. So I expect that's how provision is going to work, much in the same way it does with cooking in World of Warcraft. Like anyone that doesn't heal perhaps will benefit from being able to cook, but I'm not 100% certain about that. It was difficult to see the benefit of it from what we played. Other things probably not recreational, but part of the game that were new with the lockpicking mechanics, which are different, better, sort of less irritating than Oblivion. You kind of hold the mouse button down and you sort of push the keys in until they start to wibble, and then you sort of release them, and you have to do it with 5, and you have a time limit. So it's quite a nice little mini game, really, quite good fun. And I sort of didn't get to the point where I was breaking too many lockpicks and running out, but I think that's the thing that anyone can do. So the lockpicking skill, I think, is gone. I'm not sure. As a skill on its own, I think it's gone. Yeah, that was fun.
Okay, moving on to character skills then. The guys at Bethesda have been very open about saying that the skills that you have aren't locked to a class like they are traditionally in MMOs.
Yeah.
Do you get any experience with that?
Yeah, definitely, and this is the way that they've tried to put that Elder Scrolls fit on a game that really wouldn't normally be able to do that. In an MMO, you don't normally have that kind of freedom. And like I mentioned before, I went for a Nightblade. So there's three sort of tiers of skill available for the Nightblade class, and also there's also all the armor skills that you have and the weapon skills as well. And also each race has passive skills, and they all kind of go up and sort of increase, and you can add new things depending on what level you are. So I chose the assassination skill tree. So I started off with this Assassin's Blade, which is, like I mentioned before, the finishing move. So that's what you get as default. And then I think when I got to level 3 or maybe 4, I picked a teleport strike, which is probably the most un-Elder Scrolls skill that I've seen, because this lets you sort of target a character in the distance and you just blink across and attack them straight away. So it's a way of initiating combat, stuns them slightly, and you kind of get in and you sort of get into the flow of combat, and then eventually you'll use like your Assassin's Blade to finish them off. There were some interesting ones that appeared a little bit later on, and we could probably come back to this in a later episode and go in them in full detail, because I sort of went and did a list of pretty much everything they've got. One was sort of mark target, so you're able to mark a target in sort of a battle for death. So presumably there'll be some kind of visual marker that will pick this person out, and it means that all of their sort of resistances that a lot of the races have naturally are ignored. The sort of the gambit being that your resistances are ignored as well. So if you're a dark elf and you have a fire resistance, if you mark someone else for death, you're going to lose that fire resistance, but presumably they're going to lose all their resistances as well. So potentially, like, as like a support skill, if you're picking out someone that you know is like a tank that has loads of resistances to fire and things like that, that's a really great way of sort of opening up like a chink in their armour. There's also ultimate skills for every skill tree as well. So there is like an end game skill that will be the sort of the thing that you're aiming for. So with assassination, it was like an area of an effect attack that the kind of reduces healing effects. So you do it towards the end of a fight, and then you do like a certain amount of damage, and then I think it was about 75% of healing effects are negated by this attack. So like in a big battle, you're thinking Cyrodiil PvP at the end of the game. You're running into a big group of people and hitting this, and suddenly like everyone's ability to heal is drastically reduced. So it definitely felt like Assassination was the PvP tree for the Nightblade. So very much like the rogue in World of Warcraft. Racial skills are quite interesting as well, because again I only tried the Dark Elf, but the sort of passive skills that are there from the start, so there's ambidexterity, I think, which probably helps with dual wielding. Dark Elves get like a dynamic skill at level 6, which increases stamina and magical resistance, and then they'll get resist flame a little bit later on at level 16, and their ultimate skill is one that we've seen before in almost every Elder Scrolls game, which is the ability to summon an Ancestor Guardian. So I think in Morrowind this was actually a ghost, and I think perhaps in Skyrim was it Familiar? I can't remember. I didn't play Dark Elf.
It certainly wasn't in Oblivion, I think.
Yeah,
Familiar.
So yeah, you've got like a familiar skill there, and they've done the carrot on the stick thing of having something that you're familiar with on the very sort of like your best skill that you can attain after leveling up. But there was sort of like, the thing that hit me is it's just like a genuinely kind of bewildering array of things you can do, like just with all the weapon types and the armor types and the racial passives, and the fact that every class has 3 skill trees as well. Like the potential for sort of rolling different characters or tweaking each character to have different sets of skills is enormous. It's terrifying. Like I was sort of so kind of engrossed by what I could do that it was almost, I could have spent 2 hours just tinkering with that to find out what I could do. So in the end I sort of chose the most immediate one that would help me. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be pretty interesting, and I think that freedom is definitely the best way of reflecting that kind of Elder Scrolls mantra in an MMO.
It's already interesting stuff. If anyone watching wants to ask Matt anything specific, I'm going to open you up here, Matt. To the
by all means. I've got pages and pages of notes, and it's really hard to sort of remember individual things. So if you want sort of examples of specific quests or skill trees and things like that, with my playthrough I sort of focused, as I said, on the Nightblade, so I've got like all the info about that. I know most of it's probably out there already, but if you want sort of my impressions of it, by all means ask, and we'll do our best to get back to you. Ask away. Yeah, definitely. It was really good fun. Like perhaps not exactly what I expected, and I think it does feel like an Elder Scrolls game, but it has this kind of that MMO feeling to it because there isn't character collision and things like that. It feels a little bit sort of lighter, a bit sort of floatier than kind of Skyrim, sort of chunky, heavy kind of, really high fantasy world. But unquestionably felt like an Elder Scrolls game, and it was good fun. So I think that's probably enough of that for now. As we said, anything in there that you want, we can come back to. And now I think time for something quite exciting. Are you excited?
It's been long enough, hasn't it?
It's been well over a year, I think, if not longer. I sort of lose track, but we've sort of teased this for a while, and I don't think we can't keep you holding on any longer. I don't think.
No, let's roll the tape.
That's Olaf.
Hello and welcome to Olaf Season 2, The Cabbage List. Now, it's been 25 years since we last saw Olaf. He's been living a peaceful life with his wife Gilfrey in the house that he built with his own bare hands. He's got 2 kids, got a big pile of money, big pile of cabbages. He wants for nothing. He is living the high life. But despite all this, Olaf is unhappy. His once glorious golden hair has started to grey as time marches against him. He's getting old, and he thinks that before he goes, there are some things left in Skyrim that he has to do. So he's put them in a list. That list is the Cabbage List. A list of things Olaf wants to do or see or experience before he kicks the bucket. So while Gilfrey and the kids were asleep, Olaf sat up all night writing his list based on things he's heard, legends he'd heard, and mysteries in Skyrim to be solved, and so he sets out on his journey. So the first thing on his list is the legend of Bard's Leap, deep in Forsworn territory, which is a group that Olaf has had run-ins with in the past. He finds this great big stone pillar jutting out of a waterfall with a precarious wooden platform poking out of one side. This is Bard's Leap. It's a great height, but the water is deep enough at the bottom that you can survive the leap. So Olaf strips down. He steps out onto the platform, steels himself, and makes the leap. And he survives. There's a ghost of another bard that wasn't so lucky appears to him, pressed at his feet.
Been a long time since someone took me. Longer still, since any survived.
So before he leaves, Olaf pops his clothes back on and he drops a cabbage. Wherever he goes, whenever he achieves one of his dreams, he will drop a cabbage as a symbol that he was there. That's his calling card, basically. Next on Olaf's cabbage list is a place that's not marked on any maps, but he has heard it muttered in taverns. A great place of natural beauty, the Tree Bridge, a fallen tree that's crossed a huge ravine, creating a natural bridge. So he finds it deep in the woods after a long hike, but a bandit appears to be using it as a place to harass anyone that wants to pass. But this bandit does not realise that Olaf has spent maybe 50 years shooting things from great distances with a bow and arrow, usually in the ass. Olaf deals with the bandit, steps out onto the bridge and admires the beautiful sunset. Before he goes, he drops a cabbage to say he was here, and then heads back into the forest on his way back down into civilization. The next thing on Olaf's list is to bathe in the beautiful hot springs of Eastmarch. On his way there, he spots a familiar house. This is the marital home. If anyone watched Rags to Riches, they'll recognise this is the first house that Gilfrey and Olaf got together, where a lot of romance happened, a lot of wood chopping happened, and various other good memories. But nearby, Olaf spots a familiar rocky outcrop and remembers that this is the place where a much sadder memory occurred. It's where he accidentally shot his faithful hound Cabbage with an arrow in the head. It's a sad moment. He reflects, he drops a cabbage for his old friend. But life goes on. Finally, he reaches Eastmarch. The hot springs are bubbling away, famous for its geysers and its salty waters. Olaf strips down again. There's a lot of nakedness in this episode. Sits down and enjoys the lovely hot springs on his tired old muscles. He reflects on Cabbage, on Gilfrey, on shooting elk in the ass. He's lived a rich and fruitful life, but there's more he can do. He has the spirit of a man, a hard-working man who wants to do and see everything. He will not leave for Sovngarde until he has fulfilled everything on the Cabbage List.
Right, there you go. The first episode of season 2 of Olaf. I'm pretty impressed. I'm excited. What do you think, Dan?
I'm so glad he's back.
It is. It feels nice to have him back. It's like putting on a familiar jumper.
I think I should say at this point that anyone watching that hasn't seen the first series of Olaf, which you probably need to put it all into context, that's available on our channel, and we'll link to it at the end of the show.
Yeah, definitely go and check it out, because it's there's quite a story arc to it, isn't there? Really, that he was pretty low when he started, and now he's achieved quite a lot. Bless him. So thank you very much to Andy for that. That's great work. Let us know what you think, and stay tuned as ever to Elder Scrolls Weekly for more on Olaf. What we're going to be doing is we'll be premiering each new episode of Olaf's season 2 in this show, and then we'll also be showing it on Fridays. So please subscribe now if you want to stay informed, and we really hope you enjoy what direction Andy's taken Olaf.
What comes from the mad mind of Andy.
Yeah, it's a disturbing and dark place. So there you have it. That's pretty much all we've got for this week. Like we said, by all means ask any questions if there's anything specific you want to know. Give us your reactions to the latest episode of the Cabbage List, which is a name that we agreed makes no sense whatsoever, but we decided to call it that anyway.
He does like cabbages.
Yeah, you kind of get that, don't you, in the video? It's a man that leaves a cabbage as his calling card. Like we said, please subscribe, stay tuned. Thank you very much for watching, and join us again next week. We're going to be looking at the UI, answering any more questions that you've got, and of course we'll be seeing what Olaf's got up to. Thanks very much.
Goodbye.